You've heard the simple version. World War II began when Germany invaded Poland, but that's not the truth. The real beginning one that every American over 40 will recognize started long before the first shot. It started the way all great tragedies start, with people convincing themselves that the danger wasn't real. After World War I, Europe was a cemetery of shattered illusions. Entire generations lost, cities burned to dust, families left with grief too deep for words. The victors believed they had forged a peace that would last. But what they actually forged was resentment. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany harshly, financially, territorially, psychologically. It didn't heal Europe, it wounded it further. A nation that once held continental power was reduced to humiliation. And humiliation, left untreated, becomes rage. Germany's economy collapsed. The mark became worthless. Families carried banknotes in wheelbarrows. Savings dissolved like smoke. The middle class, the backbone of every stable nation, lost everything. The Weimar Republic struggled to govern. Coalitions formed and collapsed within weeks. Democracy looked weak, slow, indecisive. And when democracy fails to deliver, people seek someone who can deliver by force. Into that turmoil stepped Adolf Hitler, a man who understood fear, understood pain, understood resentment, and weaponized all of it. He didn't seize power overnight. He climbed to it, one crisis at a time, promising hope to people who had run out of it. But Germany was not alone in its descent. Japan's militarists believed survival required expansion. Italy under Mussolini promised a reborn empire. The Soviet Union under Stalin enforced loyalty through terror, willing to reshape entire societies by force. Meanwhile, the United States focused inward. The Great Depression crushed American families. Jobs disappeared, banks failed. Parents skipped meals so their children could eat. Americans grew skeptical of foreign commitments. The Atlantic and Pacific felt like walls protecting the nation from Europe's bitterness and Asia's ambitions. But oceans don't stop ideologies. They don't stop ambition. And they certainly don't stop the consequences of avoiding danger. As authoritarian regimes rose, the democracies hesitated. Germany rebuilt its military in open violation of Versailles. The world looked away. Germany marched into the Rhineland. France and Britain did nothing. Germany annexed Austria. No resistance. Then came the Sudetenland. And instead of standing firm, Britain and France surrendered it in the Munich Agreement, believing they had bought peace for our time. It was not peace. It was the final signal Hitler needed. Czechoslovakia fell. Europe's balance collapsed. The world was sliding toward war, slowly at first, then rapidly, uncontrollably. And then came the unimaginable. Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed a pact. Two ideologies sworn to destroy each other agreed coldly, strategically to carve up Eastern Europe. They didn't do it out of trust. They did it out of opportunity. With the Soviets neutralized, Hitler struck Poland. Britain and France declared war. And yet, America stayed out. Most Americans believed Europe's war was Europe's problem. The scars of 1917 were still raw. Mothers didn't want to bury sons. Veterans du battlefields. Politicians didn't want another foreign disaster. But as Americans watched from across the ocean, the world changed. Denmark fell, Norway fell. Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg all fell. France, the anchor of Western Europe, collapsed in 6 weeks. This was the first emotional peak. The first global shockwave. The moment millions realized that the modern world could crumble overnight. Britain stood alone against Hitler, its cities bombed, its children evacuated, its survival uncertain. The United States supported Britain with supplies, but still refused to join the war. Isolation felt safe, but it wasn't safety. It was the illusion of safety. While Europe burned, Japan advanced across Asia, Korea. Manchuria, China, Saudi fell. Brutality intensified. War crimes mounted. Japan calculated that the United States, distracted, divided, and reluctant, would eventually interfere. So they decided to strike first. December 7th, 1941, a quiet Sunday morning, families at church. Sailors preparing for routine duties. Then the sky over Pearl Harbor filled with aircraft marked with the rising sun. In a single hour, isolation died. America entered the war not gradually, but with a jolt that burned itself into the national memory. But what followed next would stun the world even more. Hitler declared war on the United States. The global conflict was now unavoidable. This is where most American stories of World War II begin. But the real origins were not battlefields. They were beliefs, assumptions, political failures, economic collapse. The first half of this war occurred before a single American soldier crossed the Atlantic. And this brings us to the second hook, the part of the story Americans were never fully told. World War II did not begin with aggression alone. It began because the world underestimated how quickly freedom can erode when strong democracies go silent. As the United States mobilized, factories roared back to life. Thousands of planes, ships, and tanks rolled off assembly lines. Women filled industrial jobs. The economy revived with astonishing speed. The arsenal of democracy had awakened. But awakening wasn't enough. Germany controlled nearly all of Europe. Japan controlled most of East Asia and the Pacific. The Allies were outnumbered, outgunned, and dangerously close to defeat. The emotional peak rises again. Hitler believed the Soviet Union would collapse under his invasion. Instead, the Eastern Front became a furnace consuming millions of lives. Japan believed America would negotiate after Pearl Harbor. Instead, the United States prepared for a war of endurance unlike anything in history. The Allies faced endless setbacks, the fall of Singapore, the early defeats in the Philippines, losses in North Africa, U-boats sinking American convoys in the Atlantic. Every victory was paid for in blood. Every mile regained was bought at a human cost that echoed across continents. But slowly the balance shifted. North Africa liberated, Italy invaded. The Atlantic secured. The Pacific island by island reclaimed. And then June 6, 1944, D-Day, the moment when the free world stormed the beaches of Normandy. Determined to reclaim Europe not with diplomacy, but with resolve, sacrifice, and unrelenting will. Hitler's empire began to collapse. Japan, isolated and desperate, fought with increasing ferocity. The war's final months were brutal. Cities in ruins. Civilians caught in firestorms. Millions displaced. Millions gone forever. By 1945, Germany surrendered. Japan followed after the devastation of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The deadliest conflict in human history finally ended. But what ended was only the violence. The lesson remained. World War II did not begin in 1939. It began with fear, with economic instability, with political division, with democracies hesitating when decisiveness mattered most, with people believing that threats far away could never reach them. The story of how the war truly began is not a European story. It's a universal one. Because every generation faces its own version of the same warning. Freedom doesn't collapse in a single moment. It collapses through neglect, through indifference, through believing that someone else will stand up first. If the 20th century taught us anything, it is this: when the world stops paying attention, history doesn't repeat itself, it accelerates. And that is how World War II truly began. Long before the bombs fell, long before the armies marched. It began when the world looked away.